Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, come on, come on, come on, demons.
Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and well, the D's have crashed their way back into the top four with a kick after the siren, thrashing a team that has had the wood over us for 2 decades. Prior to the weekend, the D's had only defeated the Swans 6 times in their last 29 encounters. Joining me tonight to analyse the big win at the G is longtime Demonlander George. Good evening, George.
Good evening. Good evening to Demonlanders. Good evening to Bin Man. Good evening to Andy. Can I call you David tonight? Is that possible? We'll see how many other names we can mangle tonight with Van Rooyens and Sparrows still playing around in the first, but that'll progress during the night, perhaps.
Also joining us to dissect the victory over the Swans is B-Man. Good evening, B-Man.
Good evening, George. Good evening, Andy. Good evening, Demonlanders. And I had the perfect Melbourne Sunday on Sunday. It was just a brilliant day. I love this time of year. The weather's perfect, still sunny. I had breakfast, a great breakfast with my wife, Sri Lankan eggs, scrambled eggs and bacon. I went to the footy, had just a fantastic time in the footy. The ground looked a bit slippery, remarkable, but from how it looked incredible, in fantastic condition. We had a huge victory, of course, and basically my most favourite thing in the world to do is to come home after a win like that, settle in and watch the replay, which is exactly what I did. I couldn't have I'd drawn up a dream Sunday. I couldn't have drawn it up any better. Fantastic day, and more importantly, what a fantastic win by the D's.
It was a fantastic win, and you were talking about us slipping. It seemed that we were the only ones slipping, from my point of view. I'm not sure if we had the wrong stops on, but I didn't really see them slipping over much. What were your
I don't know. I didn't. They slipped over a couple of times, so I think you got your slipping blinkers on there. But it seemed to be like there wasn't much rain the previous night, so I'm not sure what the deal was. But Track lost his feet a couple of times. I mean, there was probably 3 or 4 times that we lost our feet. Didn't really hurt us particularly, but yeah, it was quite weird given how dry it was, and it rained a little bit the previous day. But the G is remarkable how quickly it drains. So unless they put water on it that morning, I'm not sure what the deal was.
Well, I'm not too sure, but we did ask our listeners to provide a 5-star review and comment on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, and that would read out your reviews on the show. So we'll take a moment now, pause, go write that 5-star review. Okay, you're back. Thank you. El Conco writes, a must listen for any D's AFL fan. I've been a long time Demonlander and was delighted when the pod started up. They've got better and better, reflected in the presenters' personalities, really complementing each other with really insightful content. Keep up the great work, Andy, B-Man and George. Thank you so much, El Conco. That was really nice. And Judinio writes us a poem in his or her review. Once upon a time in podcast land, there was a show that was oh so grand. It spoke of demons, creatures so grim, and they had a host who was always quite prim. The Demonland podcast is the name, and it's where you go to hear the game of Aussie rules football, so wild and free. It's a sport that's unique for all to see. The hosts are witty, clever and bold. They'll make you laugh until you're old. Their insights are sharp, their knowledge keen, and they'll give you the scoop on every scene. The pod is packed with banter, wit, humour and sass. The host's chemistry is nothing short of first class. Tune in to the Demonland podcast without delay. For footy enthusiasts, it's the best place to stay. Now that's how you write a review, ladies and gentlemen.
That's a review. That's the bar from now on.
I never thought people would write poetry about us.
Well, there you go. That's there forever.
Writing slang, yes. I've been called a tanker often enough, but
If you would like to join us on the show tonight to talk about any of the topics that we're going to talk about, then please give us a call on 039016 3666. That's 039016 3666. I'll answer and put you on mute and bring you on when I can, just like I've done with Michael from Brian. We'll get to you in a second, Michael. During the week, you can call that number and leave us a message and we'll play it on the show. We have 3 voicemails to play on the show and you'll hear that a bit later on. If you're listening live, you can join us in the chat room. Head over to demonland.com/podcast. We're live every Monday at 8:30 p.m, except next week, which will be on Tuesday due to the public holiday on Monday. I don't think I've spoken to you about that, Bin Man, yet, but we'll talk about it later. If you want to join us live, then listen to us on a Monday, Tuesday next week at 8:30 p.m. at demonland.com. If you didn't catch our interview with Melbourne Football Club High Performance Manager Selwyn Griffiths, then head over to demonland.com or find it on whatever podcasting app you're currently listening to. It was a fascinating discussion and Selwyn was very open and honest and very detailed in his answers. So check out that interview. We'll get now to our caller. Michael, are you still there? Oh, wrong.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, Bin Man, and good evening, George. What a great day yesterday. The best I've seen us play since the grand final in 2021. Just a couple of quick questions. I've been a rap for James Jordan for a long while. Seems to have had not much love from some Demonlanders, but more than proved his worth yesterday. And it was great to see Cade Chandler play so well. In a way, I think that took a lot of pressure off Neil Bullen. He didn't seem to be as puffed when he kicked for goal. Any comments on that? I appreciate your thoughts, gentlemen.
Go ahead.
On Neil Bullen, actually, I looked at the numbers, the GPS numbers, and I actually just posted this this afternoon on Demonland. My sense was I watched Cade Chandler quite closely at times in this match, and it seemed to me that Cade Chandler did a lot more arc-to-arc running than he normally does. And I wonder, like, the best example of that was his brilliant goal to steady the ship in the third quarter when he sprinted, he down the wing, down the Southern Cross wing, and then crossed the ground, full sprint to give that kick that Hunter put into space for him. Then he went back and kicked it.
Beautiful kick too.
Yeah, it was a beautiful kick, and Chandler had I think McCartan coming right at him as well. So and he didn't shirk it.
But the key thing from that was how much running he did to get to that point. If you can see the replay, all you'll see is him coming across the ground, but he'd come down the southern wing and then cut across. So I think he did a lot more running than he normally does. And the relation to Nibbler is that I think Nibbler's numbers, total distance was down 1.5 kilometres than what he's averaging. And I wonder whether that allowed him to play a bit more forward. So he wasn't as puffed when he was, for instance, took that brilliant set shot. So I wonder whether, Cade, he looked quick across the ground and maybe that meant Nibbler doesn't have to cover so much ground. So that would be a positive for Nibbler if that's the case, I'm sure.
Michael
sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead,
Yeah,
George.
I think the other thing that Michael was talking about was
I'll get to that.
Was James Jordan and Chandler. I think Simon Goodwin covered this pretty emphatically in his interview post-game where he said nobody's given a game. You have to earn a game at the moment. People like Jordan and Chandler and Bowie and even Hibbard have come into the side and you have to perform. It really does send a strong culture message to everybody that you just don't roll up on the day and do what you've got to do. You've got to do better than that. And Cade has certainly shown it. Jimmy Jordan has certainly shown it. Bowie, from where he was in the middle of last year, has come back in fine form. I don't think those players are going anywhere if they continue to show that sort of form. And the same thing for Jacob van Rooyen on his first game. He's not going anywhere for a while he shows that form. And those are the words of Simon.
All right. Michael's that answer?
Thank you. Yes, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. And, of course, as always, enjoy the show.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
We've got another caller on the line. We've got this is Kieran from Canberra. How are you going?
Oh, Andy, how did you know that?
Well, I could see it came up. I saved you in the last time you called just so I'd know who's calling.
long-time listener, fourth-time caller. It's fantastic to be talking to you gentlemen again, first time in 2023, calling from a balmy 3 degrees down here in Canberra. I just thought I just wanted to raise a few points, which I'm sure some of them you'll already talk about in the podcast, but I love that Clary's being interviewed a bit more nowadays, and I love the way he talks. Particularly putting the sword to teams. I thought that was very awesome. Goody's presser. I like that he said you don't give people games, you earn them, and he earned another week, and that's our Roo boy. And lastly, Andy, I thought you'd like this, is that Melksham actually put us back into 4 with that kick at the end.
I'm well aware of that.
Yeah, I thought you'd really enjoy that, mate. So I just wanted to raise that point. And lastly, because I am from Canberra, I actually, you guys don't know how much it means to me, this podcast, because I don't get to the games as much, and just the way you guys talk about it, I feel like I'm there, and I can't wait to listen further later on just to hear a little bit more about what it was like being there, because it felt good from my living room, but it would have been almost, it would have been amazing being there. So I look forward to you guys telling me a little bit more about the atmosphere and what it was like. But thank you very much, guys. Please keep doing what you're doing. We love it down here. Our little Canberra crew loves listening to you. So keep up the great work, guys.
Thank you. That's great feedback. And yeah, I am aware that Kick put us in the top 4. I'm not one to look at the live ladders during the game, but my brother was all over it. He called it. He said, this kick, we needed to get back into, because I think they had kicked a goal late, and that had put us out of the top 4 and put them back in. And the other piece of trivia was that, and I didn't know this, but someone said that had they, you know how last week we went out of it was the first week out of the top 4.
First time in 47 weeks.
In 47 weeks. Well, had they finished in the top 4 and we finished out, they would have broken that. Well, it's not a record, but that would have our streak. I think they were going for 47 or 48 weeks, and we've knocked them out. So I'm not sure if that's true. That's what my brother said. I haven't verified it, and I didn't want to have to go back and have a look at the ladders from every week for 47 weeks or whatever. But I'll take his word for it. So yeah, hopefully that's right.
But just to highlight again, thank you to you three, because you really take us interstate Demon fans who are as passionate. Let me tell you. I don't know whether you guys have 6 tattoos on your chest, but yeah, we love it. We love the game just as much, and we really look forward to this. So thank you very much, guys. Keep doing what you're doing. That's my review.
Thanks, mate. We appreciate it. Thanks for
Kieran.
listening.
Cheers, guys.
And
See ya.
the atmosphere was awesome. And look, I mean, when we're up and about like that, it felt a little bit like the 2018 final series, with that momentum, how quickly we can score goals. And I wrote on Demonland today that it's, what they say in the States. They have this stupid saying, it's a feature, not a bug. And our ability to pile on goals in a short space of time isn't a random event. It's part and parcel of the way Goody coaches and his philosophy of controlling the momentum. And when in that third quarter, when the floodgates open, you could feel it in the stands, the excitement building and the energy building. And it was almost like it was inevitable that we were going to get on a roll. And get on a roll we did. We just never looked back after Chandler kicked that goal.
And wasn't it great that the Melbourne supporters have finally got something to collectively yell out with Van Rooyen's appearance, which we haven't been able to do since Adamuze was playing on the ground. So
I've got a theory, George, that they only selected him because he had a terrific name that 40,000 people could yell out.
It worked.
Yeah, it did work. It was really that added a real sort of dash of excitement, didn't it? And so to me, so did the way Chandler played. His energy and also his influence on the game was really exciting. But, geez, it was great to see Van Rooyen, as I'm calling him. I'm sticking with that, the Ruinator. He was great fun to watch, and it was terrific to be there.
Well, I don't know if you're aware, but Grapeviney and I always sort of claimed that we started the ooze chants back in the day.
Actually,
just sort of caught on. No one was oohs and then the people around us, and so we thought it was us. That he even wrote into the paper and got into the paper. But when Van Rooyen went for the ball, I think I was the first one.
Oh, again?
to ruin, I said, and then people around were doing it, and I turned to Grapevine and I said, I think I just started the room.
Started again.
I think I started, so I'm claiming
we'll
it.
We'll take that as gospel truth.
Just on Van Rooyen, there was a lot of calls last year, particularly in Demonland, on get him into the team. But I think Goody deserves a lot of credit for his ability to stick fat with the development of him. And if you compare him to Phil Thorpe, Amadi, there's a number of players, tall key forwards who have come in and out of teams. Ugelhagen, there's another one in my mind, the Crows player, the big Walker-like one that's been in and out of that team. That, you've got to question how good that is for their development to come in and out of teams and not settled. And he looks ready, doesn't he, Van Rooyen? And they to stick fat and hold true to the course of, what's good for his development and therefore the Demons' future, I thought, really paid off in spades. And we saw that, the proof is in the pudding. He was ready to roll, and he may not have been. And I heard him interviewed on the Melbourne Footy Club website. There's an interview with him about his selection and his debut game, and he was asked what the difference is to last year, and he basically said he wasn't fit enough to play AFL football, paraphrasing, last year, and that he worked super hard over the summer, including in the Christmas break when he went back to WA, where he trained with Trent Rivers and a couple of the other WA boys to get super fit, I think including Judd McPhee, if I'm not mistaken as well. Got super strong, spent more time in the gym, and he said he felt ready. He felt he wasn't fit enough for AFL last year. So kudos to the club for the development, I reckon.
All right, let's get into the match wrap-up, and I must admit that I was extremely worried going into this match against the Swans last week. Was still living rent-free inside of my head, and the loss of Max Gawn and how we were going to cover for him, it really had my MFC SS raging, as you can imagine. Sydney, a seriously talented side. Their midfield, whilst young, is first-rate. Their defence is solid, and their forward line has caused us many a headache in the past. And to top it all off, they're very well coached, and they always seem to have our measure. And I mentioned in the intro that this is a side that's been our bogey team for the past 2 decades. Even if you look at our very recent history against the Swans, our last 2 encounters were almost carbon copies of each other. On both occasions, we got out to an early lead, only to be reeled in by the Swans and overrun in the end. So you can only imagine my anxiety levels were not satiated by a 5-goal lead at quarter time, despite the fact that we completely dominated our opposition. And then the Swans began their fight back, and that nagging MFCSS that inhabits the dark side of my brain, it goes into overdrive. They began to get the upper hand, eventually chipping away at our lead and getting to within, I think they got to within a goal during the third quarter. They would have taken the lead too, if not for some wayward kicking on their part, and needless to say, I was on high alert. However, our Demons rose to the task, and channeling the Formula One cars just a few kilometres away, they put the pedal to the metal and thundered down the straight for home, demolishing one of our contenders for the race for the flag by 50 points. And Demonland track watcher Kev Martin ventured down to Gosh's paddock on Saturday morning for the captain's run. He gave us the early mail that Harrison Petty was training as a forward, and I think that this showed some creative flexibility by Goody and co, and a point of difference from last season. The move of Petty up forward definitely had an impact that not only stretched the Swans' defence, but it took a little heat off debutant Jacob van Rooyen. It was a fantastic debut for the young Western Australian, as we've spoken about. 3 goals, 6 contested possessions, 3 marks, and he wasn't afraid to throw his body around a little. He got into the action with 6 tackles. And over the pre-season, Demonland watchers, myself included, Demonland track watchers, I should say, have been raving about his groundwork. So it's nice for all of you to finally get a glimpse of what we were so excited about. There's no doubt JVR will be a fixture in our forward line for many years to come. And our forward half pressure in this match was excellent. This was a staple of our game in 2021, and it seemed to drop off a little last year, particularly late in the year when, as you know, injuries and sore bodies took their toll. Demons scored 57 points from forward half turnovers this week. The league average is 26 points. And our forwards, tall and small, all hit the scoreboard, contributing to the massive 134-point scoreline. JVR, Fritsch and Chandler 3, Spargo 2, Brown, Petty, Nibbler and Melksham 1. Add to that contributions from our midfielders with Oliver and Hunter 2, Sparrow and Jordan 1. And we love it when midfielders get in on the goal-kicking action. And speaking of the midfield, Clary was sensational in his 150th game. 25 possessions at 80% efficiency. His 15 contested possessions took him to a lead of 155 contested possessions over the next player, Patrick Cripps, in the most contested possessions after 150 games. He also kicked 2 goals, had 9 score involvements, 7 tackles, 6 clearances and 475 metres gained. His partner in crime, Christian Petrarca, also saw his fair share of the footy with 33 possessions, 19 contested, 9 inside 50s, 8 score involvements, 6 clearances and 572 metres gained. In the absence of Big Maxi, Brodie Grundy stood up with 21 disposals, 25 hit-outs, 10 of those to advantage, 9 score involvements, 5 marks and 4 clearances. It really is like having an extra midfielder at times. Our wingers, Langdon and Hunter, were also impressive, racking up 23 and 24 possessions, with Hunter kicking 2 goals. Our defenders too were at their intercepting best, with 32 intercepts among the back 6. A big welcome back to the General Stephen May with his 6 intercepts and 5 spoils and a beautiful tackle on the members' wing. All in all, it was an impressive win that buoyed my mood, as it no doubt did you guys and all of our listeners. A huge improvement on last week, which hopefully was an aberration given Max going down and the follow-on effects that had on the structures to the team and the psychological impact that it must have had. And I'm willing to write that one off for the moment because we've been solid at the G this season, and hopefully we travel better in the next 2 weeks. Gentlemen, do you have any other general observations you want to make before we get into listeners' questions, George?
I watched a fair few games over the weekend on the TV. What really struck me about this game in particular, we're playing a completely different style of game to most other teams in the competition. There's something very new going on, and I think it's all around the structures that we've developed. I was really surprised with the structures that we have that force Sydney into a style of play that they really didn't like. It was they were playing something like Geelong was 2 years ago, a lot of chip and kick and move it around the ground slowly, looking for short kicks all the time. Eventually it came unstuck for them time and time again, and then we exploded. It's a different style of game. It's a different style of game to what Collingwood are playing, and everybody's ranting and raving about that. But importantly, I think we should all keep in the back of our mind that we've been successful, particularly in this game against one of last year's grand finalists, was that we've played 3 of the top 8 sides this year, and we're sitting quite comfortably where we are on the top, with not like St Kilda and the other teams, Essendon, who have managed to play the bottom sides a couple of times to get them up the top of the ladder, which let's see where they are after a dozen rounds. So I think the supporters will find it very different, the ladders at that stage. But I was really impressed with the structures that we did, moving people like Petty up forward really threw the Swans into disarray down back. They really didn't know what to do. There was an extra player in there that they didn't expect effectively. And it just worked so beautifully for the whole game. So I'm very impressed with what I saw. Very impressed with the use of the different sorts of players who kept popping up during the game. But I think we'll see more of it, this structure and having the right players in the right spots. Last game we were cut to pieces because Max went out very early and the structures fell apart. This week, for example, to use the counter, we had Stephen May came in and all of a sudden the back line looks absolutely solid once again. So I think we'll see more of this sort of concentration on structures as we go into the season.
Big man, you wanted to... Do you have any observations before we get into your bit?
Just really quick ones. It's interesting what you're saying, George. I'm not sure that I fully agree with that. It's a radically different game plan certainly not a different massive game plan change to last year, more aggressive. I think it's got some key similarities to Collingwood and the Swans, to be honest. And interestingly, the stats that I'll talk to in a sec sort of talk about that transition off halfback flank. But what is interesting is, I mean, I totally agree with the structures and systems. And what it seems to me is that we control the tempo in that first half. We weren't very aggressive at all. We were, even in that first quarter when we kicked 6 goals, a lot of that was still straight down one line. We weren't changing lanes very often. But conversely, they were trying to. Yes, I agree that they were chipping it around, but in large part that was because we completely clogged the corridor and we were putting on pressure on their ball carrier and the kickers. And we got, I think we got 37 points or something from turnovers. The one that comes to mind, going fast is brilliant bit of work from Oliver to tap that ball out of Laddams, who wanted to release the ball really quickly to get that run from halfback flank that the Swans love so much, and he was onto it straight away, coughed up a goal. There was another one where they turned it over where Hunter ended up with it on the wing and put it back inside 50 for, I think Fritter scored, maybe it was someone else. So I think that it was and we did that in the first round as well against the Dogs, where we played relatively in straight lines in the first half and then became more aggressive in the second half. And that was really on display in the second half from the third quarter on. We were really aggressive from that point on. Once we got a sniff, and that's a bit what I mean about Goodwin's sort of philosophy around controlling the momentum, is that once we got a sniff, once Chandler kicked that goal, they went into red alert time and were much more aggressive, much more corridor from that point on. And, we ended up with a 51-point lead. But a couple of those just really quick observations is one, how it was, you totally agree, so clever to put Petty in, and I think one down forward, because with T-Mac out, we needed a third tall down there to play the T-Mac role, basically to come up the ground, to bring the ball to ground in the forward half, which brings the smalls and the forward pressure into it, which T-Mac hasn't been doing brilliantly at so far this season. But the other thing was being that defensive forward on the McCartan brothers and really going to work on their ability to intercept mark. I forget the number, I read it this afternoon, but we killed them in intercept marks. That's a real strength of theirs. They bounce off halfback flank using that intercept. And when Melksham came on to replace Brown, he went straight to Paddy McCartan and basically did the same thing, looked to nullify him in the second half of the third quarter and the last quarter, playing that defensive forward role. Just the final observation is I reckon that's the best kicking performance I have almost ever seen from the Melbourne Footy Club. It was incredible. Some of the kicks were just simply sublime and no better. There were two that came into mind. I'd be interested to know whether the second one you agree with it was a kick, but one was from track to Petty at the top of the goal square off one step, not even a step, to hook that, to have the vision and to hook across the body. It was just a magnificent kick in the last quarter. And the other one was May's kick to, there was heaps of good kicks, but the one May's kick to Fritter on the lead, I was arguing with my mate whether he did that deliberately. My mate thought he was kicking to the top of the square, and I wasn't sure. But on replay today, I watched it a few times. It does look like he hooked it late when Fritter came out. And if that's the case, that was one of the most sublime passes I can ever recall. And so I was in kicking seventh heaven on Sunday, Arvo.
Well, Big Man, you wanted to dig down a little into stats in regards to scores from Defensive 50, and Big Man has also requested some intro music to this segment, and I guess we need a name for the segment too. So if you've got a talent for music and want to write an intro, perhaps some lyrics for Big Man's stats segment or any of our segments, then please email us at demonland@demonland.com. There's the Andy's match wrap-up, listeners' questions, next match preview, Casey talk. So Big Man, take it away with Big Man's stats chat.
Big Man stats chat.
Or another name. You can come up with one.
Stats file. The thread from last week, picking up the stats around the total distance. That's not what I'm going to talk about, but it was really fascinating to see is that in speed, I think it's really important. The other observation I had that I was going to say is actually how well the Swans played. It wasn't as if we touched them up. All of the stats were fairly even, and they killed us in the GPS numbers. They were faster in both defence and attack, and just as a weird quirk, we almost ran exactly, it was a 200-metre distance difference between the two teams over a full match in terms of distance run, which was incredible. But really, Langdon was the only player in the top 4 or 5 for all sorts of metrics. distance run, speed, defence in defence. So I thought that was really curious. But I just wanted you put some stats up today from Oliver, from a tweet from Oliver Gigatz, which is points sourced from defensive 50 as of the end of round 3. And the reason why I wanted just briefly to talk to that is that's sort of picks up what you were talking about before, George, and what I was talking about, that sort of that Collingwood style and Sydney style of moving it from the half-back line in a wave, with wave running quickly, aggressive through the corridor. That's what Collingwood built their whole model on. That's what we've promised to do more of this year, and we have been doing that. The kicks to the corridor, really quick bounce off the half-back flank. And so these numbers, this point source from D50 is a terrific stat to actually give some meat on the bones of who's doing that well, who is bouncing off half-back flank well, who is transitioning from the defensive 50 into the forward line and scoring well. And at the moment, we're on top of the differential ladder. So we've scored 68 points for and 31 points against. 31 points against is, don't worry so much about the against. It's really the for, because that's really what, defines how well you're moving it from your back half. And we 68. Interestingly, Sydney are 66. And so they love to do that. The team that's interesting, that the team that sort of really brought this in last year to footy is Collingwood. They're way down on 56. So, a couple of things that are really interesting about that is, one, Collingwood have won one more game than us. Is that right? Yep. And two, we've played 3, as George pointed out before, we've played 3 really good football sides. We've played 3 finalists from last year. So, we've had a loss up against Sydney when those numbers were well down. So our round 1 and round 3 numbers in terms of transitioning from the back half have been fantastic. And to me, that's a really big tick for the shift that Goody's made this year in the philosophy with, really sort of a player like Hunter. He really exemplifies that change. You watch how often he kicks to the corridor. That's a big, big change for the Melbourne Footy Club, but also the way we, it brings in their intercept markers, but how quickly we're moving it. But we're only giving up 31 against. So I know there's a question later about, is it always going to be a higher score and give up more when you score more? And I think that, that's sort of tied in with that stat. But I think that Goody and the team would be wrapped with that table at the moment. Interestingly, St Kilda are 3rd on that ladder. Maybe that's a function of where they're at on a ladder, and Greater Western Sydney. So that bouncing off half-back flank is become a really important part of our game. It was last year, scores from the D50. It's not a new thing, but we're certainly, as I said, Goody'd be thrilled with those numbers.
Just a question for you now, since we're talking about stats, Ben Man. I noticed we had 6 players who had more than 400 metres gained on the weekend, and the Swans only managed 1. Those 6 players included Jordan and Rivers, and the usuals May. How does that fit in with what you've been talking about?
The forward, as we're, our template is territory football. I heard someone today on one of the shows before talk about, Geelong are well down and that they brought in territory. It's a complete nonsense. Geelong copied us. We won 2021 grand final on the back of a territory games. They get it forward. I think the differential in the numbers speaks to their inability to transition it. As I just pointed out, that the Swans are 2nd on the ladder from scores from the back half. We took that away from them, and so they couldn't get the game on their terms. And I think we did that in a number of ways. And that stat really reflects it, is how well we pressured the both running at players with the ball and running from behind. And how well we clogged up the corridor. So we gave, there were a number of times where players looked inboard, looked to pull the trigger and didn't, because of how well we had that covered. And for me, that's that all-team gut running, that all-team defensive running that just makes it so difficult. To me, that's the weakness in that game plan of both Collingwood and Sydney, is that its antidote is pressure. And I think we've seen that. The Swans got hammered by 80 points in the grand final under the pressure that Geelong applied and couldn't manage the pressure, despite them playing, I think, really, really well. Looking back, 50 points will look like a shellacking, but they were in that game. It was, with 5-6 minutes to go in the third quarter, it was 6 points the difference.
Yep.
And as I said before, all the numbers were pretty level except, George, that one. And so when the Swans do their review, that'll be one of the first numbers they go to because, the two ones that they'll be worried about are that we smashed them in contested footy. All teams want to at least break even in contested footy, and we smashed them on metres gained, which is really metres gained is in many ways is a function of forward half footy and transitioning. Keeping in mind, someone like Jordan, he kicks at 60 metres. That's 60 metres gained. Doesn't matter where on the field that is kicked. But particularly when you get, the last few weeks, Oliver's been off the charts, hasn't he, with metres gained and track. What was track's metres gained?
It's 500 or something.
500.
Yeah. So you've got some of the best footballers really doing getting it forward. The other one that was awesome, I thought, in that space was, and I'll be really interested to know when we get to that question about best on ground, is Brodie Grundy. I thought he was brilliant in that space. And you can see, if you watch him play, it's get it forward. So he runs in straight lines, chest open to the goal, runs in straight lines and looks to get it forward. The other thing is, that we brought in last year that other teams are now doing, these long, really long 20, 30-metre handballs forward, and track did at least 2 or 3 of them that were, 20, 30 metres. We're doing them again. They all count toward metres gained as well.
It was 572 metres gained, so almost 600.
Grundy?
No, for
No, track.
That was Bin Man's stats files. Oh, didn't have the sound up for that one. All right, we'll have to play next week. Had the X-Files
Give it a
theme.
bit more zing, Andy. Come on.
I had the X-Files theme up on the other computer. Didn't have the volume up, so we'll have to get our creative team onto that. All right, let's get into our listeners' question. Lazy wants to know what turned the game. In that third quarter, it was starting to go the way of many Melbourne versus Sydney games. I felt that something needed to change, but we really trusted our contested footy, then eventually turned the screw. Were there any other key things? George, what turned it for you?
Yeah, I can tell you what turned it. It's a bloke called Brodie Grundy. And people had better get used to the style of rucking that he does. It's completely different from what Max does. He did exactly the same thing in the last 12 minutes of the Brisbane game last week. He just took we were actually losing in the contested possessions around the ground and in the middle up until that point. And then all of a sudden, Grundy started to impose himself in the middle.
Contested possessions or clearances?
In clearances in particular, but also just as a ruck. He was suddenly just throwing his body around as a ruck. Max is more of a marking around the ground and also a tap ruckman. Brodie's the old style ruckman, just hard at it, physical presence. Laddams had a big break just before the end of the third quarter. He was off the ground for a good 10 minutes. They were obviously trying to do something to bring him up against Grundy in the last quarter, but Grundy took him apart completely in that last quarter. So what we've seen is as the match progresses, Grundy gets stronger and stronger and stronger. All of a sudden, our mids start getting the ball out a lot more than what we were in the first 3 quarters, effectively. The same around the ground. We suddenly winning the stoppages, the critical stoppages around the ground. So I put a lot of it down to Brodie Grundy. And once you get that momentum swing that Bin Man's talking about, everybody else piles on board and we take full advantage of it. But it was almost like a rerun of that 2021 grand final where in the third quarter it just opened up and things just kept on happening. And the team has this habit now of piling on goals in a very quick way. Looks fantastic for the fans, but sometimes you just got to look a little bit deeper about who's causing it, sort of thing. Last year we saw Luke Jackson contribute in the middle in a similar sort of manner, but we've got Brodie Grundy there doing the same sort of thing in a different way this year.
Hey man, anything?
I concur about the influence of Grundy. He looks in some respects, he plays like people talked about wanting to see Jackson play, like a big midfielder. His follow-up of his own work was incredible. His clearances, this is completely anecdotal, but my sense is the clearances he got were from his own work, or his follow-up clearances were fantastic, and he's always going forward, and he's obviously super fit, which is incredible, which is fantastic. I thought it was, really, really impressive performance. He had a lot to, he's got a lot of responsibility with Max out of the team. He probably was 70% ruck with others sort of, Rooey being one of them and others giving him a bit of a chop out. I thought it was super impressive performance. And I would argue he's probably the most impactful player on the ground. And I know we'll get to that question. If there was a turning point, I think two things. Our fitness was what turned it. Late in quarters, we got on top. We are clearly a super fit team. We were running on top of the ground in a way that we just simply weren't in the last part of last season in that last quarter. But if there was a moment, that changed the game, it was, I can't remember if it was Buddy or maybe it was Logan McDonald who missed.
McDonald, yeah.
6 points. The next play, I even said to the person I was sitting with, my mate, that, this is critical now. If we can score a goal after they had the momentum, they were pushing hard and had a great 10-minute period. And it felt so similar to so many other games, like the grand final, when the Dogs were on top in that period. They just couldn't take their chances, could they? Was the play. It was an aggressive play. Rivers was involved. It came through the middle. And there were two special kicks in there. It spat out to Oliver, who was running forward but had no one to kick to, and that you could kick to the side. Great thing. Yep. That's the great thing of being at the ground, because he wanted to go forward, but there was no obvious target inside 50 that he could kick to, and he kicked laterally to Hunter. But what was brilliant about it, and it was directly below me, was he kicked in a way with the outside of his foot. He was never going to be able to hit Hunter unless he stopped and let Hunter run forward of him. They were both running parallel, and he kicked it with the outside of the foot in a way that Hunter didn't need to break stride. And that made all of the difference, because he could then run onto it, and that's the goal that set up Chandler. So Chandler went back, and I was right behind that, that kick. That was such a super important kick, because it was 6 point the difference. They had all the momentum. He went back and absolutely nailed it with this sort of nice curve on it. And that was it. The game was over after that. That really was, if you were to pick one moment that the game changed, that was it. And it was on the back of aggressive running through the middle. We took it from the halfback flank right through the middle of the corridor. Just a stunning bit of play from Oliver, both the vision and his ability to do that. And then just a brilliant weighted kick from Hunter, which is one of the key reasons we've got him to that club, for that smart kick inside 50. And as I said before, some just brilliant gut running from Chandler to even be an option and to go back and kick it. So for me, that was there was 1 point, that was it.
Well, thank you, Bulldogs, for giving him what did we get him for? A third round pick?
A pack of chips and half dozen Pepsi Maxes, I think is.
Thank you very much. All right, we have a voicemail from a friend of the show now, Noah from Bentley.
Hi, this is Noah from Bentley. Just wanted to say I went to the footy for the first time in a long time with a fellow Sydney Swans mate. I was a bit disappointed with our backline this week. Wanted to hear the opinion of what George and the rest of the crew think. I think they really sort of let us down. And our ability just to be able to control the back line and our defence was pretty lacking this week. I want to know your opinion. And, of course, JVR, what was the opinion of everyone there? I think he did really, really, really well. And I think he's going to be the next Dermot Brereton / Tony Lockett. I'd like to know your opinion, guys. Go D's.
Well, we'll touch on Rooey's debut a little bit later, as we got a question coming up about him, but on the back line, and I think it's important to remember Sydney are a very good team. They have some very good talent down there, and say what you want about Buddy these days, he's still a great player. Had he kicked straight, he might have kicked 4 goals. Logan McDonald is a good young talent. I haven't seen much of Amati, but from all reports, he was very good last week, and he took a few good grabs, and had he kicked straighter, he could have had 3 goals. And love him or hate him, Papley is very dangerous. He can get off the chain, and he kicked 3 goals of his own. And then you got all their mids who are very good at finding space, and then getting the ball and finding the big sticks. And Sydney are a very good team, and they kick winning scores. We struggled against them for years. Add to that, this was May's first game this year, as well as Hibbard's, and Petty was moved forward. Tomo was dropped. Our back 6 or 7 hasn't been settled this season, and it sometimes takes a few weeks for them to gel. Don't discount that aspect out of it. All in all, we still kept a very good team down to just over 80 points. It's probably a goal or 2 above what we normally would have liked, but we played a very good side and we scored 130 plus, so I think that's a win. George?
Yeah, I have to disagree about that assessment of the back line. They held up very strongly, particularly in that second quarter when the Swans had plenty of opportunities. It's just too easy to forget that people like Heaney were held to 10 possessions for the game, Papley to 8 possessions for the game, and these players have killed us in the past. Now, I seem to recall Logan McDonald kicked some ridiculous number of goals against us during last year as well. All of these players just didn't perform. The back line held strong for the whole period of time, and we took out Harrison Petty out of the middle of it to be playing up the other end. It's not surprising that your third best defender's playing up the other end of the ground. It doesn't look as cohesive as what it has been in the past, but they still held together strongly, and the Swans still lost by 51 points.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree, George. And in fact, I wrote something very similar today on Demonland, that it was, as we talked about, a really clever move to put Petty forward. He played, both obviously needing a third tall, but as a defensive forward role, he was super effective. But it was the back 7 that allowed that to happen. If one of those, they had 3 talls, Amati's young, but, if he'd taken his chances, he would have kicked his 3 goals and it would have been different. Buddy had shots at goals. If they'd got on top of us, their talls had got on top of us, we would have had to bring Petty back. The back 7, I was thinking, did a brilliant job, really, in terms of preventing the need for Petty to come back. And I thought Hibbo brought some really tough steel into it. McVee's it's a cliche, isn't it? But he's got that thing of good players. He's got time and his ability to, make good decisions. I can't say I agree with that assessment. And, there's a question later, which I'll chop you a little bit here.
Do you want me to read it out now? Is that?
Yeah. The question from It's Another Time about the...
It's his name is It's Time for Another. It used to be It's Time, and then we won a flag, and now it's time for another one. Okay, it's time for another. Does highest scoring have to mean highest scores against? We are currently first for points for, but 9th for points against. Last year we finished first for points for against, and I think the second the year before. Is it as simple as deciding to have more players running ahead of the ball, which results in more players being behind the ball, chasing when the opposition get it back, or is it something else? Do you agree that there seems to be a change in the connection inside 50 where forwards are leading more into the space in front of goals instead of leading out to the boundaries? I thought Chandler noticeably did this a few times himself and passing into the area. It also seems that there were more instances where players were looking into space for options rather than having rush snaps from acute angles.
So taking the first part of that question and relating it back to our defence, is the short answer, yeah, of course, is that if there is a relationship, if you're going to score high, we've come in with a more aggressive mindset. Goody's been clear, so has the coaching staff, that we're going to be looked to be more aggressive. That's been the clear message, both in the preseason. We saw that in the 2 preseason games, and we've seen it in both the Dogs game and this game. That's the biggest score we've racked up since 2021, I think I read, or even 2018, I think. It's the highest score we've kicked since 2018 at the G. If you are going to actively look to score quickly and play the way we're playing, which is ball in motion, the ball moving forward, getting it forward, then you're going to expose yourself to scores on the rebound. It's just a fact. A really good example, and it's not just, it's the philosophy. It's not just moving it quickly. So as an example, there was a kick that was a beautiful kick. All the world looked like a beautiful kick. Hunter to a leading Fritsch in the third quarter. Fritsch was leading straight up the gut, straight up the corridor. Hunter was on the half-forward flank. Last year, with a philosophy of being less aggressive and more risk-averse, the kick from Hunter would have gone to the pocket, the one that blows up everyone's brain, because that's the percentage play, right? So under a new way of playing and a new, more aggressive mindset with a player who's green-lit to be able to take that kick, he took that kick to to Fritter in the corridor. From my angle, it looked like he was going to hit Fritter, and I was already applauding it. But a Swans player intercepted that ball, marked it, and went straight up the other end, straight up the guts for them to score. That's the risk. If you're going to be more aggressive, you expose yourself to getting scores on the rebound. As we talked about a few times last year, in basketball, when you are down in basketball, the way to get back into a game is to create a fast-scoring game. Another good example is the game we played against Collingwood late in the season last season. We played super fast in that first half. We dominated them. We should have been 8-9 goals up, but we gave up multiple goals on the rebound. They were uncannily accurate, but that's the risk. Fast footy is almost always going to mean that you're going to give up. If you're trying to score high yourself, you'll always give up more scores on defence.
And I'm sad to say that players will be still kicking to the pocket. You've only got to look at where Chandler kicked his goals from, where A and B kicked his from. They were well and truly out on the pocket, nice and safe. And fortunately, this week they went through. But it is the best option when you're running hard. Then you can afford to go through the middle. Yeah. But when it's more structured, then it'll finish up in the pocket. So sorry, folks, you're going to have to put up with it.
Though not as many kicks to the pockets as that question alluded to. We are definitely kicking more centrally. So that kick track did to Petty, that might have gone to the pocket last year, or that wasn't probably a good example because it wasn't a pack. But we are definitely kicking from stoppage situations more to the hot spot, 20, 30 metres out directly in front. Less so, it was a bit more difficult once BB went off the ground. But another good example of the change mindset is the goal Jordan got, because Chandler took it on the half-forward flank. Really good mark. I didn't realise it was him at first live at footy because he really stretched up. I thought it was a taller player. Without thinking, without any hesitation, he kicked inboard to Jordan. And two things have to happen for that to work. You'd need to train that all pre-season, was Jordan has to be in that spot. So Jordan had to run to that spot, which was an aggressive spot to run to. So we're definitely doing more of those kicks. Just on the scoring, the other just a common sense thing in a way is that, like last year when teams tried to keep our score down, the way to do it is just to hold the footy, to chip it around, to not go forward, to take the time out of the clock. It's just, the opposition can't score if you've got the ball, but we didn't do that in the last quarter. We took the, time out of the clock for about 5 or 6 minutes, but once the game was 24, once it was clear they weren't coming back, we just attacked, which we weren't doing that last season. We were almost looking like, how low can we keep the opposition score to? Whereas the change this year is how much can we score, but then you give up the 2 or 3 goals to the opposition that you otherwise wouldn't give up. So, yeah, there's definitely a link.
Red and Blue Make Purple asks, can we pass the defender role for a Charlie Cameron, Tom Papley type from Hibbert to McVeigh? I didn't watch enough of Casey last year to have an opinion. Hibbert had a stellar game at Casey last week. However, I thought that he has dropped off in the first and lost his player a bit. How'd you see? I wasn't paying too much attention on who was on Papley. What was your estimation of that, George?
Hibbert was mainly on Heaney during the game, and if there was a player who always cut us up in the past, it was Heaney.
Well, Heaney I didn't notice much of, so...
Yeah.
And they did chop and change a bit on McVeigh. Yeah. I try to watch a little bit on the replay because at the ground I'm hopeless at it. But if I was to guess, I would say 50% of the time McVeigh was on Papley and did a good job in that time.
8 possessions he got for the game.
Yeah, I mean, he took a nice mark against him, but that was So I think I don't know. To be honest, I don't think they're. Or maybe they are competing to a similar spot. I think McVie is the player that he played on Cameron last week. I think he is the player they're going to play on that medium forward. Again, that's another big tick for our defensive unit because, as we've talked about, it's exactly the player like Papley that gives us trouble. It was last week against Brisbane. It's those medium, forwards that we struggle with. So. On Hibbert, I thought both Hibbert and Jordan, particularly with our contested ball numbers being down last week, both really added a real steal to the team, didn't they? Hibbert didn't have a fantastic game, but I just felt both brought in a real physicality and a hard-nosed sort of approach that, I think that we lacked last week, obviously, and were both, terrific, I thought.
Mandalorian says, we were all square in the clearances, both in the middle and around the ground. I think they smashed us in the second and third in this area, coinciding with them whittling down our lead, but we even things out as we put the pedal down. What did you guys think of the battle between these two exceptional midfields, George?
Yeah, it was. It really was a momentum swinging game in the midfield. Like I said before, they were killing us in the middle. They were getting the ball out in that second and third quarters, early in the third quarter particularly, and then we swung it round completely. So yeah, it was great to watch from a football spectator's point of view because you had probably two of the best four, perhaps midfields in the competition playing against each other. It was exciting to watch. Watching Oliver in fine form. Track seemed to be a little bit down in the middle from what he normally is. He was much better around the ground, I thought. But, it was a great contest, if nothing else. And we won out in the end, which I think is going to be very important as we come up against sides like Collingwood on the King's birthday this year. Watching them, they have an enormous number of players go around the ball, which creates their opportunities that people see them running fast and hard and wide and open. But I counted at one stage they had 8 players around the ball in the game against Richmond. It's amazing to watch. They've changed. They're running a different style to us. So it'll be interesting to see how the two compete against each other when that happens.
I thought that you're right, George. They were on top in the clearances early on. Their midfield, weren't really on top of ours, but the numbers certainly were trending their way. To me, a really critical part of the match was the fact, the amount of pressure we were putting on their midfielders, and when they did win clearances, as we've talked about before, the importance of putting pressure on that kick. I thought that was a really critical part of the match. It really brought Lever into it, really brought May into it. For me, that kept us in it because, that and our incredible accuracy, it just goes to show, like, if they'd been more accurate in the game could have been completely different. But I thought early on when they were on top in the ruckwork and the clearances, our ability to pressure their mids was really important. And then as the game wore on, we really got on top. And if you listen to Longmire's presser, he's asked about the midfield and he says, look, paraphrasing, he said, basically, we look at this team and this is where our midfield needs to get to. We're talking about 3 All-Australians, Max, Viney, Ollie and Track. And he said, that's, 3 All-Australian midfielders, 2 at any one time, that's the level we need to get to. And I thought that was really interesting because basically he was saying, we're a level below Melbourne's midfield. And I think it's important for D's fan to remember just how good these, like, Track, the argument who's best between Petrarca and Oliver can swing, depending on what day it is for me. So incredible to have that level of talent in our midfield.
It's just
remarkable. And then you've got players like Captain Jack and Viney, who I think are both underrated, who aren't, are in the top 20 midfielders in the AFL, well, certainly Viney.
It's just remarkable. I mean, we've got the 2 probably the best midfielders in the AFL at the moment, And then we've got the best ruckman. I mean, albeit he's injured at the moment. I mean,
who's placed by another All-Australian ruckman.
they're almost, if you were picking a top five, they're in the top five. These people that do all these lists, they might try to make it fair and split around. But in my book, and I'm taking the rose-coloured glasses, the red and blue-coloured glasses off, they're top five for sure. Viper Crunch says, hey guys, looking forward to a cheerful podcast this week. Yes, certainly has been. I would love some thoughts on the overall pressure of this game, especially Sydney's pressure. I felt alive that they really brought the heat, but I haven't looked at any of the numbers. B-Man, have you looked at any of the numbers? Did the replay put up those pressure stats or anything?
They did. Now, it's interesting because I just wish they'd release this bloody data, but they now put it as part of the coverage where they put it up during the game where it's a rolling number, and the pressure was off the charts, and spot on there is that their pressure was top shelf. I think that's, again, I said it before, but they played well. It wasn't as if we just rolled over a team who had an off day. I thought they were a bit off early, and they fumbled early under pressure. They took a while to balance up, which again reinforces the significance, the importance of how accurate we were.
And they weren't accurate because they missed
easy
shots.
What was the set shots? Was something crazy like 16-1 or something, or 16-2 some at one point. So that was super important that I thought, managed that pressure better in the first 15, 20 minutes. And really that was the ball game in some respects. But yeah, I thought their pressure was top shelf, and watching it, they always say 180 is the average, like it's now some benchmark, but 180 is the average according to the commentators. And the game was played north of that almost the entire game from the vision that they showed on the replay.
Supreme Demon wants to know, is Clayton Oliver the early favourite for the 2023 Brownlow medal? It's probably very early. I haven't seen enough of other teams.
Round 3 it is, so leave it for a little bit longer, I think, before we start making those assessments.
The answer is he is.
But he is, yeah.
But he's, like all good teams, he's going to have a lot of votes taken.
That's right, exactly.
The question I've always got about Oliver for the Brownlow is, has he got past the umpires? Never seem to like him, but he doesn't seem to talk back anymore. And he's very, you notice him on the field with his haircut. So, maybe, it'd be interesting to see the votes from this game, actually, whether Grundy, but it'll be him, won't it?
Are you talking about the coaches' votes?
No, I'm talking about the Brownlow votes.
Yeah.
All right. The other thing is that the umpires are now realising that this Clayton Oliver bloke's not a bad player at all.
Yeah.
They really didn't notice him for the first couple of years when he was getting 40 possessions in the middle, but now he's very noticeable, and people are talking about him, so that'll favour him.
And he kicks goals. He's kicked that goal running through the middle, but also his set shot. I was more impressed with that because, one, it was, it was an important time, but two, that's been his big weakness, hasn't it? His yips in front of goal.
That goal on the run reminded me a bit of the bang, bang, bang goal from the granny.
And that was another example. That goal was another example of the shift in mindset to be a more aggressive mindset. Because that one, they could have gone to the pocket, but they went to the corridor. But the play that led up to that was full of aggressive sorts of decisions, and to ultimately go into the corridor. It was a beautiful handball to Oliver, really hit him. But that was a really good example of the change in our game this year.
Adonsky writes, a discussion into James Jordan's excellent game and why he was left out of the side in the first 2 rounds is needed. 21 touches, 8 marks and 1 goal yesterday. Miles ahead in consistency and output versus Harms. And he says also, and Sparrow, who he's competing against. I don't know. I'm very bullish on Sparrow. Harms, I would say I prefer Jordan over Harms. George?
Yeah, when Jimmy Jordan starts putting in games like that, you can't take him away. Unfortunately, Harms last week, like I said, just wasn't with it or whatever. I mentioned he kept losing his man when he was playing in the midfield, which cost us dearly. But you're not going to drop Jimmy Jordan from that sort of game, and Tom Sparrow is coming along very, very nicely and maturing very, very nicely. It's nice to have a range of ages in the players that we've got. What's Sparrow now? Probably 22 or something like that. And he's now cementing a place in the midfield as one of the first options for the rotations.
Yeah, and he's a player that, again, I think you've got to look past the stats on Captain Jack, because he really he's the chop out for Viney for a start. So, and no other player can do that in the way that Captain Jack can. He looks super fit, but his marking ability overhead's been pretty important at different times. He took another good mark that, under pressure this week, went back and kicked that goal. He's not going out of the team. JJ's a really interesting one. This is the first, maybe I'm thinking one of the first times he's had his extended run in the middle. And he looks like a natural midfielder, and as I've talked about before, he's been asked to play all these different roles in the team, almost like a utility that comes, a sub obviously for a long time, which must be super tough for a young player. You're asking a lot of a young player to not have a settled position. He looks like he's lost a little bit of weight, trimmed down, and maybe he's running a bit better. I suspect, is exactly what George said, is that, they've got markers that they need them to hit fitness-wise, but also form-wise, and that they wanted him to show that. And he had a great game in the VFL last week, and so did Hibbo, and they both got selected. It's a real interesting one with the players coming back in. We'll get to that later. Yeah. But, I'm a huge rap on JJ. He makes really good decisions. A lot of the criticism that he got last year, I thought, is quite unfair. He's often criticised on Demonland, at least for so-called being slow with, his release of the ball, but that fits within the game plan. We were playing a slow release game plan last year. This year we're playing a much faster release game plan, as we've been talking about, and it didn't seem to me that there was, fast release, he can do that as well. He's a disciplined player who will do what, he's supposed to be doing. And what he got, 22 possessions? Something like that.
Yeah, 21, 8 marks and a goal.
That's a solid game of footy after, coming back in after not being in the team for the first couple of rounds. So, yeah, I'm a huge rap on JJ.
We have a question from Engorged Onion just about harms, so I'll play that.
Evening, Demonlanders. It's Engorged Onion here. A couple of quick questions to ponder. Where to for harms from here? Is he best 22? And granted, the season is a marathon, but notwithstanding injuries, I personally feel at times he is quite the liability. And my new favourite silky player, McVee. Can you or anyone tell us about his rapid ascent in development? Any thoughts on either of those would be fantastic. Cheers and have a good potty. Bye.
So harms, where to from him for here? I can't see him getting back in this week. We're not in the changes section yet, but yeah.
I've spoken about that. I wasn't impressed by what I saw in Brisbane by any stretch of the imagination. And when someone else comes in the side and takes your place in the way Jimmy Jordan did, I'm afraid there's not a role for him. McVee, I'll have to put my hand up and say I thought he was on the D-list category at the end of last season. There was nothing that I saw at Casey that would indicate that he had a genuine future, but gee, he has come out of left field completely, and
I wonder
he's got that remarkable ability to find space and time that you only see in very, very few players. So, he's been a true revelation. Yeah. I hope he gets a little bit more muscle on him, because if you're playing down the back line, you're going to be hit pretty hard over the course of the season. But he's been doing pretty well so far.
He doesn't panic at all. Like you said, he seems like he's got time, and he doesn't always just take the first option he sees. And I think he will be. I wonder what it was, what the footy department saw in him over the summer that they put him straight into the practice matches, obviously, to see what he's got. But he was straight in. He hasn't looked back since then. I wonder what it was that they saw at training, Big Man.
Just to go working back to harms, it's worth noting that he was out for personal reasons
so there
which
could be something going on there, which we're not going to speculate about, but Yeah.
And it's a hard one. He falls into that category of players where you don't know exactly what his role is. So therefore, it's hard to look at his stat numbers. But, it depends. It depends again without that knowledge about the role. But, for me, I'd have JJ ahead of him. He's on the bubble for me. But, he seems a bit of a heart and soul player. He's, obviously very popular with his teammates. He's better when he's got a specific role, and when he doesn't, it seems to me it's a bit 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But he's exactly the player that's on, going to find it tough. He's going to be on that, he's somewhere in probably the 16 to 23 range, isn't he, in terms of the best, in terms of the list. So that sort of player's always going to be at risk of losing his spot, I think. On McVeigh, I think two things. Is one thing, what I said before about the work that the WA boys did over Christmas. I've heard Judd talk about that and said that it elevated his game to another level, just getting super, super, super fit. So that's definitely a factor. My sense of why they picked him is obviously they would have had some insight into his, that ability to create time. But it's his kicking. I'm absolutely positive that's why he's playing that role. I think Nick Dacos for Collingwood on the halfback flank has shown the importance of having that excellent high-level distributor off the halfback flank. We've got Bowie, who's obviously super important in that as well. You add another one, it addresses the problem of having a medium defender on those medium forwards like a Papley. For me, it's what they want from him is that kicking. And there was one kick that, he does lots of beautiful kicks, but there was one that just said to me, this guy's clever. It was, not much of a kick, but he weighted it high, kicked it high. It was only a 20-metre kick, but he had to kick over the top of a player coming at him, and he had to change his decision in a split second. And to me, I just thought, well, that's a skilled player who's got, that ability mid-kick to almost change it. So the other thing about him is that, he makes such good decisions. He rarely wastes the ball. So for me, that's probably what they saw in him, the need for that halfback distributor to come into the team. And he's played that role fantastically, hasn't he?
Yeah, yes. Bigfoot says, and we've already discussed this, but I'll just read it through, give him a shout out. I thought Brodie Grundy absolutely stood up in his role of lone rock. Not only did he win his hit-outs, but he took marks around the ground and was an extra mid at times around the ground, racking up 21 disposals. How did you rate Brodie's game? I think we've answered that one. We all rated him very highly. And look, he's got a big job ahead of him for the next few weeks without Max, but I think he's going to rise to the challenge. Radelaide gives kudos to the Wingers Club. They were firing on all cylinders today. Hunter is going to be the recruit of the year. Langdon too was prolific. They owned the Wings. I thought they were both fantastic. Both had around 23 and 24 possessions. Hunter, as we said, kicked the 2 goals. Langdon had 9 score involvements. So, what more could you ask of those guys? Having two wingers that play as wingers is just what we needed all those years. We got Langdon in for that purpose, and we've got Hunter in for the other purpose on the other wing, and it's going to be a big plus for us, big man.
Fantastic game from Langdon, wasn't it? And I just really love that challenge that Langdon and Hunter now give to the opposition coaches, because who do you look to shut down? And there was a comment on Deanland, which I forget who wrote it, but I completely agree with it. Goody's often criticised for his, he's being out coached, and everyone loves Horse. They think he's the greatest coach since sliced bread was invented. But the poster noted that he thought he missed a real trick not shutting Langdon down, and I completely agree. Langdon was, how many score involvements did you say?
9.
That's you've got to cut him out of that. You've got to cut him out of the chain. And even if that means you're going through Hunter, he was just so influential. And I love the way Langdon's almost developed like his own stylistic kick, that one that he hooks back from the boundary line into the corridor in front of goal. It's already created at least 2 or 3 goals this season. He was back to his running best in many ways, because that's the wing they chose to go down, the Swans. And So I don't know that Horse did have such a great game coaching-wise. I think
No,
Woody took the points on this one.
That was my worry before the game. I always think that Horse is
Genius.
we go into games just to win, do our own thing and win it off our own. But he goes into games trying to negate the opposition and win it tactically, rather than, not that they don't have the ability to win it off their own boot. But he's very, and I think he didn't have any answers. In hindsight, now looking at the game, we outcoached him. He just didn't have.
Yeah, and another thing is he let May and Lever just chop him up with intercept marks. There was, just on the defence, there was a brilliant bit of play when May went back to the goal square, leaving Buddy to kick it from 50, and he kicked it straight to him.
Yep.
Buddy is a shadow of the player he once was. Really, his liability is way too strong a term, but if he's not kicking goals, Buddy's not giving much, which is part of the thinking, I'm sure, with Goody about playing Petty up forward, because I think it was predicated somewhat on the fact that Logan McDonald is still a young player. Amadi is up and down and, is not that physically strong. And, Franklin, who looked out of condition, to be honest, isn't really the threat he was once. So May gave him a bath, I thought.
The other advantage, going back to the Wingers Club, was Hunter releases the people that last year we were trying to fill the gap with. People like the Brayshaws and the Harms and the Jimmy Jordans.
Yeah, Jordan doesn't have to play wing, does he?
Doesn't have to play wing, and none of them were particularly good at it.
Spargo doesn't have to play.
Spargo doesn't have to play it, as part of the rotation. So all of a sudden, those players are more effective playing in the roles that they're more attuned to.
And looking at those GPS numbers, if I was a punting man and had to pick the three fastest players.
You are a punting man.
If I was a punter and had to bet on the three favourite players, now I would bet on Hunter being one of them, but I wouldn't have before he came to Melbourne. He's surprisingly quick, and we know how fit he is, but he covers the ground super well. Like on that GPS data, he's up in the top three Melbourne players for speed.
El Diablo 14 asked, did you guys like Petty in the forward line? He's competitive and a good mark, but you can see he lacks forward craft and skills. Well, I disagree with the lacking of forward craft and skills. We've seen his forward craft and skills on display before. Remember, he's pretty much been playing full-time in defence, first at Casey and now with the D's for a good couple of years, and this was his first full game back in the forward line. It will take a while for him to gel and get into the groove, but before I get your thoughts on this, guys. Pew 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 writes, props to Demonland's track watcher Kev Martin for providing us with the early mail on Petty in the forward line. I thought it was a masterstroke, particularly with JVR debuting. It really took some pressure off Rooey because having Petty up forward required a decent defender. If you would have told me that we'd be without T-Mac and then lose Ben Brown by halftime and still kick over 130 points, I would have called you crazy. I don't think we've seen the last of T-Mac or BBB, but I'm not worried about the future of our forward line, particularly because I see young Matt Jefferson kicked 4 goals in the twos. All hail Jason Taylor. And we'll talk more about Rui's game in just a moment. But, guys, what were your thoughts on the masterstroke of Goodies by playing Petty up forward? And thank you, Kev Martin, for the intel on that. Obviously, Sydney didn't read Demonland before the game.
But as I said before, I thought it was really smart. But I think it's important to note that he was playing as a defensive forward as much as a pure forward. I actually agree with El Diablo that he is a bit rustic with his forward craft, which is not surprising.
He hasn't played there. He hasn't trained there all summer.
No, but he played a forward like a defender, and I think that's what Goody wanted. He did exactly what he was asked to do, which was to minimise their aerial impact. They bounce so much, they rely so much on their ability to mark in the half, in their back half, and then springboard from there. And if you noted when either of the McCartan boys got it, they were sweating, and Melbourne players were sweating on that next kick in the corridor. And a number of times they hesitated to pull the trigger. And if that model, you've got to go straight away. You can't hesitate at all because the space gets closed down on that next kick. So, I thought it was a really, smart move. He does lack a bit of forward craft, but that's not surprising seeing he hasn't been a forward.
I think the this was more of a horses for courses sort of move, particularly with Sydney's forward line, Franklin and who else, a couple of other young kids up there. Our defenders, we had May back this week to bolster the whole thing. If May wasn't back this week, I'm sure Petty would have been left in the back line. But also up forward with Tommy Mack needing to go back to Casey for whatever reason. It just left us a little bit exposed. You've got Ben Brown and another 19-year-old coming in for the first game. Here was the opportunity to put that little bit of extra marking power down there and challenge, the McCartan's time too as well. You needed someone who was a strong mark overhead, at least takes those factors out. I suspect we might see the same against West Coast next week, and we'll talk about that a little. But again, horses for courses, a different team. I think we'll see Petty back to the old reliable third man in the defensive structures.
Yeah, I do too. Maybe not next week, but I think that his future, not obviously, but I don't think this will happen that often. I think exactly it was horses for courses, in which case you've got to give Goodman credit for a coach. It's remarkably gets criticised sometimes for not being innovative, or I just think that's a nonsense narrative. The other thing, you've got to love Petty's competitiveness as well. The part of the decision, I think, is that in some ways Goody must love coming up against Franklin, because May is able to play him one-on-one old school, and he's strong enough to beat Franklin one-on-one and not lose many one-on-one marking contests. But Franklin's not fit enough now. May ran off him. Mm-hmm. So May was able to beat him one-on-one in marking contests and run off him to zone off as well. So, I think that was a big factor in why it was possible to put Petty forward, because you didn't need that third zoning player, because really, he's become quite one-dimensional as a marking forward, Franklin.
Lefty says, young Rooey had a day out on debut, 3 goals, took a fantastic grab, didn't look at all lost, rucked admirably when called upon. I can't wait to see more of him. What did you guys think of his game, George? It's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Pretty impressive, and I loved it from the very first minute when he went into the pack and he absolutely laid a perler of a bump on one of the Swans players, and everybody goes, "Oh yeah, there's something we've got special here. This is going to be something worthwhile seeing." And he only got better during the game. He competes. He brings the ball to ground. There are a number of goals that. Perhaps people don't notice the work that Van Rooyen has done to get the ball to ground when he was not in a marking position, and then to top it off, he takes that absolute screamer, which brings the crowd to their feet, of course, and hopefully we'll see a lot more of that. But yeah, again, Binman talked about it before. Credit to the coaching staff and the development staff to make sure that this kid is ready to play, and when he turns up, he just proved that point so beautifully for all of us. So and he kicks accurately for goal. That's the other beauty. Love people who are accurate in front of goal. I'm sure Andy does as well.
Yeah, I would have liked a one grab screamer, but I'll take it. Be mad.
Everything is just totally agree with what you said there, George. Just an important thing about Petty going back. The other thing that was beneficial about that move is that it reduced some of the pressure on Van Rooyen, because he would have, if Petty had stayed back, he would have had probably the second or third best tall defender on him. But with Petty going forward, they couldn't afford to do that. So I thought that was important. But I think your point, George, is so important about his ability. Well, not even ability, it's more his desire to impact aerial contest, even when he's well out of the contest. There were a couple where he wasn't going to mark it, but he refused to not be a participant in the marking contest and brought the ball to ground. We've pointed at that all last season, and watching him, his just will to want the footy is so obvious. Even if you didn't follow footy, you could just watch him play footy and go, well, there's a kid who wants the footy. He wants to be the star. I just loved it. I just loved the crowd reaction. I just loved the energy that he gave. it reminded me for, anyone my age that it really, really, really reminded me of David Schwartz when he first started playing. Like,
absolutely agree with you there.
The way he moved, his aggression, like his outsized aggression you know what I mean? Like he's 21, but he's playing, he's in people's grill. It was like having flashbacks apart from the wrong number on his back for that. But, just also the energy in the crowd when people were chanting his name. I just thought it was fantastic. Great debut. And again, like he may have had if he played last year and come out and had no kicks, kicked no goals, what does that do to his psychological development? Now he's got something important to bank, doesn't he, to move on from. The other thing I'll point out is that just loved it. He took that screamer 20 metres out from goal and high fives his teammate. He hasn't even gone back yet to kick the goal. But, that sort of enthusiasm it's got to be infectious, doesn't it? Like for fans, but imagine his teammates. They love him already. So, as the commentators were talking about, Melbourne's got a new cult hero. And, when was the last quote unquote cult hero in this? I mean, Cozzy maybe, I don't, but yeah, it was awesome to watch. And he's got good footy IQ. And the other thing, George, is that your point is a good one around his kicking. Really neat, economical kicking action, 2 or 3 steps. I heard the commentator say last in VFL footy, he's kicked 38-14, I think. So he's an accurate kick. He knows where the goals are and he wants to be involved. I think we've got a star on our hands.
I loved 6 tackles. I think Oliver had
team high tackle.
Oliver had 7, but the next was Sparrow on 4 and then Viney on 3. So yeah, he was right up there. So, and he got rewarded for one of them as well. I don't know if it was actually he should have been dropping
that was
the ball,
pretty tough.
But
he got 2 pretty good free kicks, I'd have to say. But
anyway. That's
we'll take him.
I'm never going to say no for a free kick in the forward line, considering how many we've had against us over the years.
What about the one against McVeigh? What the hell was that? He didn't have any time to get rid of the ball. That's bloody lost my.
That's the worst. Those ones. It doesn't matter across any game in AFL. Whenever I see that, that's just.
Particularly when there's 25 other examples during the match where exactly the same thing happens and no decision.
There's ones where people actually drop the ball and then it's play on. Red and Blue Make Purple says, on the telly, you got a great view of Chandler bouncing pinball style from swan to swan on the back line without getting a stat. Has he in one game gone past Spargo as the hard-running defensive forward? I don't know why people are so hard on Spargo. I thought he was good, Spargo.
8 possessions, probably 6 score involvements. Well, that's one of the most beautiful kicks in board that you'll ever see to Benny Brown. I mean, no one's replacing Spargo or Nibbler.
Well, that's the thing, and we'll talk later.
And
the mark too. But Chandler was good too, and we've got a real dilemma on our hands. We'll talk about it soon because all of our small forwards do well. Now, I've always said it with our small forwards, if you've got low possession games, you've got to do a couple of things. You either got to be hit the scoreboard, or you've got to be defensive pressure, or be scoring, have a lot of score involvements like they'll do. So I don't know. People are very hard on Spargo, but he does a lot of work.
And the thing about Chandler that I noticed, I really noticed he did a lot of running this week. And so, if you added up all the kilometres all of the players have to run, like I said before, we ended up remarkably only 200 metres difference in total distance run between the two teams. Everyone's got to contribute to that. To our total distance. But if Chandler's going to be doing, say, 2-3 kilometres more a match than he was, that's potentially less work that a Spargo and a Nibbler have to do. That means they can be inside 50 more often and they'll kick more goals, just as exactly as happened on the weekend.
We'll just go through this quick. Stu writes, seeing the tactical and personnel changes the coaches made before and during the game, do you think we will see this tactical flexibility continue throughout the season, or will we revert to being predictable when Max returns from injury? I imagine the coaches will see what and who works during the first half of the year and then rotate through those options depending on the opponent and in-game situations later in the year. And I think that's it. I don't know why we're being so critical, thinking when Max returns, we're going to go back to I don't know, what do you think whether last year's thing? I can think you can see we're doing different things, as Big Man's pointed out. We're doing different things this year. It's tweaks, it's not wholesale changes, but it is a different way we're playing.
And still based on the same foundations, which is win the contested ball, territory, get it forward. And I think, as you pointed out, George, is also, I think that who's getting it forward. So our best players are getting it forward. It's like, so we're getting good value on those inside 50s.
Grundy the Great says, after 3 rounds, we are the highest scoring team, having played 3 of the better teams in the comp. How does this reflect on our game plan, adjustment and forward line structure overall? And now, all pre-season, all I heard from every pundit, they put a big question mark against our name when it came to our forward line and our ability to score the way that we have in these 3 games. And we've played quality opposition too, whereas some of the others at the top of the ladder have had a much easier run. Everyone put a line through our forward line or put a big question mark next to it, guys, and look at us. 130
again,
points.
it's about the stat that I mentioned before. We're number 1 now from scores from D50. That means fast ball movement. When you move the ball quickly off the halfback flank, the opposition defence does not have time to set up their zone. So you get lots more one-on-ones. We run in waves. We get players ahead of the ball. We outnumber in defence and in offence. And when we do that, you get free players like an Oliver running through the corridor. You get the kick to Chandler. Like, think of that shot, how much space there was in the forward line for Hunter to kick into. Like, he kicked it 20 metres in front of into empty space. When you're moving the ball like that, you'll get much more one-on-ones as well inside 50, all of which helps your forward line function better, doesn't it? Because you're getting more one-on-ones, you're getting leading lanes that forwards can lead into, and you're getting players out, by themselves into space.
Oh My D's writes, at the start of season 2023, the AFL had the D's with the 7th oldest list in the competition. Against the Swans, our under-24 brigade stepped up emphatically and impacted the game in our favour. Petty, Pickett, Spargo, Rivers, Van Rooyen, Chandler, McVie, Jordan, Sparrow and Bowie, just to name a few, are all under the age of 24. Does the panel think that our list has the capacity to emulate the Cats and maintain a sustained period of success? Well, I hope they're talking about the Cats of previous years and not the Cats of this year, George.
Yeah, we can talk about this in 5 years when Oliver's 30 and Petrarca's 29 and things like that. So I think we have to sit on this one for a little while. I'm not a great fan of aging lists when you look at the oldest to the youngest, and particularly when you look at the best 22 on each side. There's not a great deal of difference, and I keep harping on it. The reason players are old is because they're good. They stay in the side because they're good. So at the moment we've got a lot of good players, and what we hope is that since they're sort of hanging around the 22, 23, 24 mark, that they'll be around for another 5, 6, 8 years. Let's go even further if we can. But it's one's not a function of the other necessarily.
And it depends a little bit on luck, because you're drafting a player, you hope it's all going to work out, but you never quite know, do you? And that said, we've got I think a really good good range on that sort of demographics in terms of younger players. Blooding younger players like Captain Jack and Bowie really helps for the future, because already even a player like Jordan's up to 50 odd games, and you get experience into those really young players. But you've got a player like Jefferson, and some is one of the posters in the questions. He kicked 4 goals on the weekend, didn't he? Looks good. You've got Howe, 33 possessions. You've got so I think they're doing a great job with creating a list that's sets us up for long-term success. And if you listen to Goody, he's been talking about, and Pert, he's been talking about that for the last 3 years. This isn't about winning a grand final; it's about sustained success. That's been a mantra of Goody, ever since he joined the club.
And Pert with that, we want to play finals every single year,
Yeah.
Sarian has produced a table. I don't know if it's his table or got it from somewhere else, but there was no credit to it. Of our goal kicking accuracy, we lead the league with an accuracy of 60.7%. We've had 84 shots and kicked 51 goals, 20 with 13 no scores. Essendon, Collingwood and St Kilda are next on 55.4, 53.9 and 52.1 respectively. So we've 5% higher than the next team. Carlton and Hawthorn are at the bottom with 40% and 34.3% respectively. All I can say is all hail Choco Williams. Whatever he's doing down at the Choco Williams Goal Kicking Academy, it is working. I couldn't be happier. It's been my biggest criticism of the Demons for a number of years, and whatever we're doing, it's absolutely working. Our kicking for goal has been fantastic, particularly the set shot kicking. I'm happy.
It's a dream. It's like a dream. I can't believe it's been beautiful. Without looking at the numbers, I know there's some stats you can see where the goals are kicked from, but I do wonder whether we've been more aggressive. We're playing more corridor footy. Certainly on the weekend we took a lot of shots from directly in front, so that's going to help your scoring accuracy. So that there's a connection to the way we're playing. I think that's unquestionable. And if you're getting more, if you are moving it quickly and you get it in front, you get out the back of the opposition, you're getting run-in goals as well, walking goals where you're kicking it from the goal square, which is obviously going to help the accuracy. But, there was some great kicking on the weekend. Fritter's kicks from the angles, as George said, they weren't all from the corridor, were they? So Chandler, he was on an angle both times. Fritter, Chandler's snap was a beauty.
All right, let's get on to Casey. Casey remain undefeated after 2 rounds of the VFL season. This week they played host to the Sydney Swans under sunny skies at Casey Fields and comprehensively defeated them to the tune of 41 points. I think they scored the last 2 goals as well, so it was even more than that. Demon-listed rookies Matt Jefferson and Oliver Seston kicked 4 and 2 goals respectively. Blake Howes was prolific, amassing 33 disposals and taking 16 marks. Andy Moniz, Wakefield and Deacon Smith continued to impress. Adam Tomlinson also had 33 disposals and took 16 marks, whilst Tom McDonald put his hand up for a recall to the ones with 20 touches, 11 marks and 2 goals. George, I know you watched the game. Just want to give us a brief rundown of who impressed you.
Yeah, I think you've covered off most of it, but the surprising thing about Casey was there was hardly any wind down there, which would have to be about a first for track watchers and people who attend them. Excuse me. What wasn't all that surprising was Joel Smith reported in injured again, so he didn't play. So I don't know what the injury is. We'll probably
during the match, George, or
no, he didn't play at all.
Right.
Before the match. Before the match. There were some nice performances, plenty to give us hopes for the future. Jefferson. With 4 goals, 2 of them were absolute gimmies, inside the old Joe the Goose sitting in the goal square once, but you still got to be in the right spot. He has got a great pair of hands, so looking forward to his development.
Doesn't he?
Yeah, like Van Rooyen was last year. Give the kid 12 months down there, and I think we'll see probably a centre half forward come into the side next year if he keeps going the same way. T-Mac was fantastic, strong, bullocking, made his presence felt throughout the ground. 20 disposals and 11 marks, 2 goals. You couldn't have asked for anything more from him. Bailey Laurie also put in a good performance. They took him off at 3/4 time. Obviously, he was shunted up to the MCG in the event that somebody might have injured themselves in the warm-up, but he certainly was in everything again. Oliver Seston, a couple of goals. I heard during the week somebody say he's one of the best kicks at the club. So that's an interesting comment from one of the insiders. Kicked 2 goals and he gave off at least 2 more, absolute gimmies to others who are in the goal square and things like that. So he could have easily finished up with 4 goals for the match as well. Down the back, Howes with 33 touches and 16 marks, and Tomlinson also 33 and 13. They were just cleaning up everything. They didn't need to do a lot. It was just that generalship down the back. They were always in the right position, always, again, coming with the proper structures. They were just always in the right place at the right time. But yeah, again, it's these younger players, like Howes, fitting into a system and learning how it operates in the event that they have to be called up to the seniors or preparing for next year and the years after. They know what to do. They know where to go. They know how to fit in with other players in the back line and the defensive structures that have been set. So, yeah, it was at the end, it was an easy 41-point win, and Casey just keeps on keeping on, and the development of these younger players is something to watch. I really feel sad for people, like a Bailey Laurie and like Luke Dunstan, who put in all the efforts, but the problem is, who are they going to replace in the seniors when you're playing in the midfield, when we've got the best midfielders in the business already in the first? So short of injuries, unfortunately, I doubt that they're going to get a run this year.
It's interesting watching Casey to get a sense of our overall depth and talent as a team. And, you talked last year, George, a bit about the depth falling away a little bit, which I agree with completely. But then you've got players like Laurie who has come on and has already got a senior game this year. You've got Howes, who was 100% in front of McVie last year. Like, if you'd asked who was going to get selected first out of those two players, almost everyone would have said Howes last year. So those sorts of numbers are fantastic. But comparing the two teams, Sydney and the D's, is that, they've not got that many injuries at the moment. They've got Reid and, one or two other players out Sydney. But out of our best 22, we've got who didn't play on the weekend. With Salem's out, Cozzy's out,
Max, of
course. Max is out, obviously. And from that rucking, Farris White's injured, isn't he? And also Burrell, unfortunately, is out for 6 or 7 weeks. So, we had, so we've had at least 5 or 6 players, 2 or 3 who would have played in that game as well, and we were just so much better team than them, both across the board talent wise, but also, as you said, George, our system is so strong, and that 2-club thing of having the system drilled into them, is clearly a huge thing. It's a massive challenge for the club, isn't it? How do you manage it? A player like Laurie, but then I'm thinking like Tomlinson. He was awesome in this game, and what I just really thrilled with his attitude to the game, and also T-Mac, the way that, there was no sense of I'm playing seconds footy, or at least that's not how it looked on the telly. The body language was super positive. Just a final thing is a shout out to a player who I just love watching play footy, Munro. Isn't he just like
He's the epitome of the VFL footballer, isn't he?
Who's the other guy? Munro and the other guy there.
White, but he must have
White's out injured at the moment.
Okay, right, he's out injured. But Munro is like every suburban footy, and he's a bloody good footballer. He gets the pill as well, and he gets in the opposition faces, and he's a star. I love him.
Let's get to interchanges. We got Red and Blue Beard asks, so who gets dropped when Gawn comes back? What role, if any, is there for Big Ben Brown and T-Mac? And I think it might be a bit too early to talk about who comes in for Gawn. He's still at least 4 weeks away. There'll be plenty of discussion about that in the lead up to Anzac Day, so we'll table that one for now. But we did get a look at the forward line without T-Mac and Big Benny Brown, and after halftime anyway. So if Big Benny Brown is out this week, does T-Mac come back in? He had 20 disposals, took 11 marks and kicked 2 goals for Casey. Before we answer that, we do have a voicemail from Queen Bee Anne Demon just on T-Mac's future, so I'll play that one.
Hey, Andy, George, Bin Man, Queen Bee and Demon here. Just wondering what your thoughts might be on T-Mac. Love him, love his career. Everything he's done for the club, centre half forward in a premiership side. But I wonder now, we've seen a glimpse of the future on Sunday, and T-Mac might become break glass in an emergency only. Jacob didn't look out of place. Petty certainly doesn't look out of place. Cozzy coming back. What's the future for T-Mac? Love your thoughts. Love your work. Look forward to the podcast every week. Go D's.
So what's your thoughts on, Big Man, what are your thoughts on T-Mac? His future potentially could come back in this week, depending on Ben Brown.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think if Benny Brown can't get up, then T-Mac is probably the likely one to come in, maybe. I mean, I think it's a good question. He's been there before, hasn't he? In terms of crossroads. I think it's really important to remember that he's coming off a Liz Frank injury that he elected not to have operated on the off chance that he would be able to play finals footy. And by all accounts, that was a risk. And that you just need to watch him post game, or even after training. By all accounts, I haven't been down to training, but he limps after the match. He takes his shoes off straight away. The medal's still in his foot, as I understand it. That it's he talked about on that podcast that I referenced last week, that he constantly has to manage it still. This is, so I think that has to be considered. Liz Frank is an awful injury for such a, for any footballer, but particularly one who's 6'3", 6'4", 6'5". I think it's a totally valid question. My own feeling is they've sent him back to get some form and to get some touch. A lot depends on whether how serious that injury is and how much it is actually impacting on his game. And the bottom line is the club's not going to tell us, Liz Frank is really causing him problems. But it's definitely a factor, don't you think, George?
I think so, and I think we will see a lot more of T-Mac this year. Ben Brown also isn't the most physically robust person at the moment. Yeah. We've got a 19-year-old Van Rooyen coming in who's been expected to do ruck duties. We've got Max, who's out, who would have been fulfilling roles in the forward line. We're going to need a rotation between all of those players at various points during the season. It's very likely that Ben Brown will not play this weekend. I'd be very surprised if they do put him in. We'll talk about that shortly. But that automatically creates the option for T-Mac to come in. The same thing will happen, no doubt. I suspect with Van Rooyen, you'll play him for a few games, then give him a rest if it works out that way. But yeah, we're still going to see a lot more from T-Mac. Let's hope his body does hold together. Unfortunately, he's getting to that point in his career, like a lot of players, where the injuries become a little bit more prevalent. But let's keep the fingers crossed for both him and Brown that they can reach the end of the season having been managed throughout the whole season.
Yeah, I think the key word you said then, George, is rotation. And it's interesting, that's been another philosophical shift that we haven't quite seen tested yet because it's early days, obviously. But I've heard Goodies say, they've talked about the review they did quite openly and the things that they know they need to change. There's lots of things that Melbourne fans pointed to last year. And of those things, almost the number one thing was, why aren't we rotating players? Well, why aren't we doing what Geelong are doing and giving our older players a chop out and bringing in younger players and using that energy? That was a big point of debate last season. Goodies said, I've heard him say that they're going to be looking to rotate more to, if you play well, to bring you up from the twos to better protect the older players. And I think, this week will be an interesting, opportunity to see where they are with that philosophy. For instance, do you put Benny Brown on a plane if he has got some back problems? So I agree. I think that we'll definitely see them this year. And, if we go by what Goody said, they'll definitely operate more with a rotation philosophy this year than they did last year, which means players like BB will, maybe get rested mid-season for a couple of games. And, BB and T-Mac aren't exactly analogous roles, but they can certainly come in for each other if need be.
D Minion writes, Cozzy is back next week. Who do we drop from the side? I thought Cade Chandler was superb. Only 9 disposals, but 3 very important goals. Likewise, Spargo had a low possession game, but kicked 2 goals. I can't see Nibbler being dropped, and I thought Jordan with his 21 disposals and a goal was very good too. He'll probably keep Harms out. Will be interesting to hear your thoughts on changes for the Eagles game. Cozzy has to come back in. His role as a midfielder, sometimes midfielder, and he's kicked 4 goals in the first match. How can we not bring him back in?
Yeah, my gut feeling is
who goes out.
They won't pick Brown I don't think they'll pick Brown if he's got back problems.
Yep.
Doesn't make much sense putting a 6'9" guy on a plane across the country and flying back for no disrespect to the Eagles, but they have half their team injured.
We'll talk about that in a minute.
So that's an interesting sort of philosophical thing is, do we factor that in? I don't think they'll pay. So if they take him out, I reckon, and I don't think T-Mac will come back in this week for pretty much the same reason. Why would you expose him to the travel or whatever? In which case that brings, you've got a smaller forward line and Cozzy comes back in potentially. You could keep Petty up there. They've only got the two, genuine tall forwards, West Coast in Oscar Allen and Darling. So you only really need the two key forwards, defenders. We've got May and Lever, so Petty could remain forward. And, so my gut feeling is neither T-Mac or BB will be selected this week, and Cozzy is one in.
And McGovern's out in defence as well. Apparently his hammy's pretty bad.
Shuey's out. God, my God, poor, that club cannot take a trick. But
couldn't have happened to a better club. But
Liam Ryan's out.
We'll go.
Shuey's out. McGovern's out. Cripps is
Withenden.
out. Yeah.
I think slightly differently. I think we'll see Ben Brown out and Cozzy come in as forwards, and I think T-Mac will come in and replace Melcham on the sub because T-Mac provides options for ruck and forward. Melcham was less than impressive again this week. He still hasn't recorded more than 10 kicks in the 3 games he's played in total for the whole year. And you need far more out of your forward. Again, no tackles in the forward line when everybody else is providing a lot of defensive efforts. For me, it's T-Mac in as the sub and Cozzy replaces Ben Brown.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I'd say I see what you're saying. I mean, I agree with the pressure for Melksham, but he's come on clearly with a role to play in this game, for instance, which is a defensive forward. It makes me laugh, though.
Except he wasn't defensive.
Well, he was on the man. He didn't allow any intercept marks, and in that time, his opponent took no marks.
Yeah, but
he
doesn't
forward. Tackle enough, and
he doesn't tackle. He doesn't. Unless it goes out the back and over the top, he doesn't get the ball.
Yeah, it does make me laugh when the commentator, I don't know why, they keep on saying what a team-orientated player he is, and I keep on thinking when they say, well, I'm not sure how much Melbourne footy you watch, but it'll be interesting. I just also think, I don't know that at all is the way that clubs are going with a sub. No one's really doing it just because, but I agree that T-Mac does offer that flexibility. I think the other one probably on the bubble would be Hibberd. He was terrific, but, someone's got to come out. Jordan as well. Like Jordan is sort of similar to Harms. He could be on the bubble. So the two players that'll, will Harms come back? That'll be interesting to see. So Harms and Cozzy are the two sort of only ones who are best 22 or roundabout who might be coming back next week. Is that right?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, yeah.
Yeah, so, Harms, I don't think Harms is going to be pushing Jones out. So, my tip will be BB comes out, Cozzy comes in.
And yours, Andy?
I think I don't think we're going to risk Ben Brown. They got so many outs West Coast, so I don't know if we'll bring Tom McDonald in, but I also feel that we could be light on tools, but yeah. Cozzy
they're light on everything though, tall, smalls, mediums. Speaking of West Coast, Jaden Hunt, ex-Demonland sponsored player, kicked an absolute blinder of a goal in this match just gone.
He doesn't play for us anymore. We can't talk about
it.
Yeah,
but Jaden is... Yeah, it was a great goal.
We had a new poster signed up just today and posted this question. Cos GTV writes, with West Coast licking their wounds after an injury-riddled derby, is it too early to look at resting players for the big trip over the West like Brown and Viney, who have recurring injuries? Getting runs on the board early is important, but last year showed that list management needs to be a priority, or we won't be there for the final day of the test. So, we sort of discussed whether...
Fascinating question, really. But, I mean, one of it was really, really interesting for me hearing Selwyn Griffith talk, and one of the things that relates to this question is if they don't play, they've got to find their kilometres somehow. So it's not just as simple as saying we're going to rest a player. It might actually be no good to rest a player because they've got to go back to VFL and get the same numbers. And he made the point that VFL isn't the same intensity as AFL level. So therefore you've got to do something else with their program. So if you quote unquote rest a player, like let's say Oliver, he's somehow got to have to get the same load in as he would in a match. They're not going to send him back to VFL level, but then he's still got to do the running. And, as the club's pointed out for the last few years, they train just as hard as they play. So you're just as likely to get injured midweek at Melbourne training on the day they have their full hit out as you are in a game, is what Track basically said a week ago.
Yeah, it's this whole thing about managing players. I guess it's more managing against the contact aspect of games, because
managing the risk of them getting injured.
That's right, because it's not like they're going on holiday for a week.
An injury.
They're not going on holiday for a week, sitting on the couch and eating eating popcorn and watching Netflix. They're
that's my idea of resting for a week.
Yeah, they when we spoke to Selwyn, if you haven't listened to the interview, I implore you, go have a listen. You'll get a great insight into how they manage the fitness of the players. It's really good. He was very thorough with everything he answered. But yeah, remember how we asked him about why did after the St Kilda practice match in 30-degree heat, why did they go across the road and run for 30 minutes? And that was because they had to, because it was only
25-minute quarters.
It was 25-minute quarters. They had to make up the kilometres. So they had to run for half an hour to make up the kilometres that they missed, because had they been doing even just a match sim, a full match sim out at Casey that day, they would have done a lot more kilometres than they did in the St Kilda game. So that's why. So if a player misses a game, he's not sitting on the couch. He has to, if he's not playing for Casey, because they don't want to. He's still going to be running and things. So I guess it's just a matter of managing the physical aspect if we are going to rest someone.
Exactly. Managing a player, I think the managing comes in if they've got a niggle that, for instance, fans don't know about, that might get exacerbated by playing. Like Ben Brown's got a sore back. Well, that would make sense in that context. But even if they do, quote unquote, rest him, he's going to have to do the 15 kilometres that he would have run in the match.
Unless he's
on
back.
That weekend.
Unless he's back and he can't run.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a
he
different
can't
story.
run at all. They'll probably put him on a bike or whatever.
And they're not going to just take a guy like Viney and just say, oh, well, just because you have got a history of maybe getting injured, we're not going to just rest you and sit you on the couch. If you've actually got a niggle, maybe, but not if there's nothing wrong. And this is still early in the year. Maybe come mid-year we might be looking at, all right, let's give so-and-so a rest because he's got some niggle and we just want to think, but the rest isn't sitting on the couch. Buck Naked adds, given the West Coast have been smashed by injuries, would the panel make any specific changes to play on this or take best available rewarding performance? So, are we going to play to their injuries or not play?
I don't think so. It's not good his style, is it? He would say to that question, I'm guessing, if, we don't disrespect any opponent in the AFL when anyone can beat us, I mean, it would be a major shock if we lose this game of footy. But probably the way to lose it is to telegraph to the opposition we're not respecting them by, not selecting 5 of our best 22, for instance.
Well, that was the question last year with Max Gorn, weren't we all saying, oh, we should have rested Max for the West Coast game and we should have rested this player. But then that presents that same thing you were just saying.
Well, and there's another factor that's super important is percentage is really important. Percentage is a big deal. Like their percentage dropped by something like 90% or something. I heard the commentators say.
They had 100% off it.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's if we can get a 100-point win, 70-point win, 90-point win, that could be the difference between finishing second and playing at the G or finishing fourth and having to travel to Brisbane.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's hope Brisbane don't finish on top of the ladder. But the Eagles, the Demons head back to their fortress at Optus Stadium, a venue where we have won the last 5 games, including our drought-breaking premiership. In fact, we have the highest winning percentage which is 67% of any team at that stadium, including the two co-tenants, West Coast and Fremantle, who have 61 and 58% respectively. That's the win rate at Optus Stadium. The Eagles are the walking wounded, with a number of players facing stints on the sideline just from this past week's loss to the Dockers. Before we get into a preview of this coming match, Demonland poster Singer writes, we're coming up against the Eagles this week, who are riddled with injuries. Cripps broken ankle, McGovern hamstring, Shuey hamstring, Witherden concussion, Ryan knee, and they could join Knick-Knack ankle and Yo calf on a star-studded injury list. Are any of you worried about us taking this match too lightly, or is that just ghosts of Demons past talking? I'm
not worried that we'll take it lightly, but it's probably almost, it won't be at the same intensity, will it, as this game that we've just played? It's, and so that wouldn't shock if we're not playing at that full-throated intensity as we did against the Swans. But I don't think they'll be taking it lightly,
It's hard to have that same intensity when you're playing against a side that is not only injury-riddled, but even if they had all those players in, they're still not the Eagles that people remember from a couple of years ago. So they may well drag us down to their level. It's hard to maintain that for the whole game, but still should be an easy victory for us. But and we are, like Ben Man was just saying, we are all too well aware of the importance of percentage, and other teams are going to be playing the Eagles over the next coming weeks as well, and they'll be racking up their percentage. We've got to do at least the same.
Exactly. And more, I mean more what you're saying, George, is that with our intensity, I don't mean that we'll come in with a bad mindset. It's just that, your intensity tends to match the opposition's intensity, doesn't it? It's like the sort of they up the ante, we up the ante, which is exactly what happened in that third quarter. They really ratcheted it up, and what was so pleasing is that we went with them and did what we did in 21 and balanced up and kicked away. So they simply won't be playing at that same sort of intensity. I mean, that is a horror show, that injury list. My God.
Well, we won't have to worry about lightning at this match. It looks like it's 26 and sunny on the day we play them. So that's good news. All right, well, I think we're going to leave it there for tonight. We'll be back next week on Tuesday night, not Monday, because of the public holiday. We'll resume back to our regular scheduled programming the week after, following the gather round. Thank you to our voicemailers that left us messages. Thank you to Noah from East Bentley, Queen Beanne, Demon, and Engorged Onion. Thank you to our posters on Demonland who submitted questions and comments. Thank you to Lazy, Red and Blue Makes Purple, Mandalorian, Viper Crunch, Supreme Demon, Adonsky, Bigfoot, Radelaide, El Diablo 14, Pew Pew Pew, Lefty, Stu, Gaundy the Great. It's time for another Oh My D's, Yossarian, Red and Blue Beard, Dominion, Cos GTV, Buck Naked, and Singer. Your questions form a huge part of this show and take a little bit of the pressure off us preparing content for the show. So thank you. Thank you to my co-host George and B-Man, and thank you to you, our loyal listeners. Don't forget, leave us a 5-star review and comment on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll read it out on the show. Really helps to spread the word about the podcast. See you next week. Go Demons.
Relax.